Hello, everybody. I'm George Williams. I'm the Next Search Catalog Coordinator at Northeast Kansas Library System.
I'm Christopher Brannon, the IT Coordinator for the Coeur d'Alene Public Library and the Cooperative Information Network. And today's episode is brought to you by the letter K. K is for Katzenjammer. K is for Kapellmeister. K is for Knucklehead. K is for Knickerbocker. And K is also for koha-US.
Awesome. As Christopher mentions, koha-US, we are a part of the koha-US Education Committee, and you can always find koha-US at koha-US.org. I'd like to point out right now that we just had our conference last month, our annual conference, which was also the International KohaCon. And if you go to koha-us.org on the homepage, we have now got all of the recordings and all of the slides from all of the presentations that had slides. All of those are available on the homepage at the koha-US website. So you can practically relive the entire conference through our website now, which is kind of awesome.
Yeah, it was a great conference. I loved it.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. It was here in Lawrence, but it was also virtual. We had it was over 800 people registered, and I think at one point we had about 200 people watching simultaneously online. So it was a really good event.
If you're looking at good questions.
Yeah, we had good questions from the people that were there and good questions online for most of the presentations. It was just an all-around good conference. So if you specifically want to find our videos, though, you can go to Learn and go down to video playlists. And the videos that we do every other week are here under the terrific Every Other Thursday training videos. This is our third year doing this, and there's a lot of stuff there. There's about, well, we must be getting close to, we must be over 50 videos now.
Let's see here. We had 24 in each season, so 48. Yeah, we're over.
Yeah, 50. we must be over 50 videos now. So, and you can also see all of these on YouTube. If you go to YouTube, you can subscribe to our videos. You can subscribe, you can follow koha-US, and every time we post a new video, you'll be alerted. Today, we're going to talk more about validation. And so I'm going to, we did 2 videos on validation. The first one was just kind of the general idea of how to tell Koha to make sure, to set up rules for entering patron data. And first time around, we entered a few rules on I think we did emails and phone numbers kind of, and then last week we added some more stuff, and this week we're going to talk some more about that. So
yeah, and today we're going to take a slightly different approach to validation, where we were taking over the submit button for the patron data entry form. This time we're going to do a little bit of a different approach where we're going to actually do some brute force formatting rather than have interaction with the staff member. So we'll show that and kind of give people an idea of different approaches to how we can improve the patron data as it's entered. So on our demo system, we used this patron before. I've removed the previous data entry or validation that we used in the previous 2 videos. And again, that was basically, we hijacked the save button, and anytime that we entered patron data and we press save, instead of it just saving, it would go through different functions and compare particular fields to particular patterns set up with regex, and it would make those comparisons. And if it saw anything that that matched the pattern that was incorrect, or excuse me, didn't match the pattern.
Didn't match the pattern, yeah.
Yes, didn't match the pattern. It would complain about it, and it would have a specific message, give a little bit more detail as to what the problem is. This time around, instead of approaching it from that perspective, we're going to do like what I said is a brute force formatting, where instead of it interacts with the staff member on these particular things, it will just change it, force it, the change, and it's going to do it. It's going to look at things on each key press, so it's going to evaluate it constantly as you're typing. So let me get out of this Patron and let's go over to where we're going to enter our information. So the first thing that I'm going to do here in this particular case, and you know, I don't do this all the time, but this is always a good practice. I'm going to make sure that we're on the page that we want to affect. Sometimes you can put code in jQuery and it'll do what you expect it to do, but then it'll do things to pages that you don't expect it to affect. So it's always a good idea to make sure that you're narrowing in on just the page that you want to affect.
Yeah, and I see you're doing this with an ID. You can also do it by the URL.
Yes. So in this case, we're looking for the ID of the page, which actually, is it the page? Let me inspect it. It's been a while since I've actually looked at this. Sometimes it's the page, sometimes it's yeah. So it is the body ID is what it's looking for. So it's making sure that you're on the page. You can specifically narrow it down even further to a specific section in a page.
Right.
It doesn't have to be just the page, but you do run into the chance that it might be repeated on another page. So I always find at least ID the page, and if you want to narrow it down further within that page, you can add the ID within that page as well to that. You don't have to stick with just one ID in the selection. So all right, so I am going to, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to define a couple functions here. And I'm going to define, I've got two functions I want to cover today. I'm not going to cover them all. I'll show you everything that I have briefly when we're done, but I'm only going to go over a couple functions for sake of time. I mean, there's a lot that you can do, and this just gives you a jump off point to do your own thing. So
Right.
That's all we're trying to accomplish here today. So the first thing I'm going to add is a function that is going to basically correct the patron entries, and it's going to look at word per word, and it's going to capitalize the first letter of each word. This works for names in our case. It works for addresses. It works for cities. So we utilize this particular function for several fields, and this is going to capitalize the first letter in each word. So it's basically having to break apart what you're typing in. It's looking at on every key up, it's looking at what you have, and it's separating it word by word, and it is taking the first letter and capitalizing it. Now, there are some exceptions to this. So we have to define some exceptions. So I have an if statement in here that looks at the word, and basically it's looking at the first word. Really, it's not looking at all words in the field. It's only evaluating, or not the first word. It's evaluating the last word that was entered. So once you've put in a space and started a new word, it stops evaluating the words before that. And there's a very specific reason why I did that. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But it's looking at the last word that you entered. And in some cases, we don't want just the first letter changed. We want to be able to accommodate for things like if the last name begins with Mick or Mac. If we had some like I don't know what the D'Angelo. We had things like P.O. Box. We had if they were a name with the second or the third or the fourth or something like that in there, we wanted to make exceptions for those particular things. And I have something in here I'm going to remove because that was something I was just testing earlier and you don't need that.
So this would allow King Charles III to have his name properly entered into your system.
Exactly. And it depends on how your library is entering things. You might be using your surnames to have those extra pieces located in those fields rather than the last name. We keep the juniors, the seniors, the first, the second, the thirds. We keep those with the last name or the surname. So that's why it's checking in this case.
Right.
We also are, we're replacing certain cases where, let's see here, where is it? We have a certain case here where we had an apostrophe and I had to make a specific rule for that, and I couldn't use the regular if statement for it. I had to use a replace for it. But if a word, I can't think of a name that does this, but it was a lowercase d apostrophe and a capital A. So I was looking for any particular instance where they had a D and an apostrophe and an A to always format it with a little d, apostrophe, and then a capital A. So that was a very specific situation, and the modifications that I've made in here since then, I could probably eliminate that because it's such a rare case. But as I said, I'm having it look at just the last word, so that if you run into a case where you have a one-off where the rules don't apply, the rules don't work right for that particular spelling or punctuation in the name, you can enter a space and then go back and edit it, and you can brute force change it, and it won't try to brute force it back to the way it thinks it should be. So kind of I built that into it so that we could work around it a little bit if we needed to. So it's basically looking at those last words and then joining it to the field, so it returns those words that are changed to what it was already formatted. So I'm not going to go into heavy detail about how this function works. I mean, there's a lot of nuances to it, but let me, the other thing that I wanted to add was another function, a much simpler function. Grab that here. Formatting always gets thrown off. Okay, and this function removes periods. I mean, I name these functions to be very specific, and so it's very obvious what they do. This one removes periods. So in our case, I've always trained staff to enter things like if you're putting in something like St. Mary's, don't put the period after Saint if it's abbreviated. If you're putting in a abbreviated suffix to a street like avenue or street or whatever, a lane, don't put a period after that. Some staff are doing it, some are not. So
Just means they all are not.
So yes, this one uses brute force to keep the periods out of these specific fields. And so, for me, I think about the data and I think about the storage, and every character you type takes up space in a server somewhere. And it's like, why throw in a bunch of stuff that we don't need? So, I strip that stuff out. So this removes the periods as you type.
What I don't like about punctuation is that it makes searching, I'll always have a staff member that will search for like AVE period. And if they're searching for something like that, if they're running a report and the report allows them to enter search terms, if there's a period in there when in the search term they type, they're not going to get a result. So taking the periods out would make it so that, that the data is more consistent. If everything is, it should either all be one way or all the other way. It shouldn't be some of it with a period, some of it without, some of them with the dash, some of them without, some of them with the, there's all kinds of places where the data consistency is nice for when somebody, for when one of the same people that does it inconsistently all the time, then they call you later and they want a report to run. They say, why is all this data inconsistent? Why do some of them have periods and some of them don't? Well, it's because the person that entered the data, some of them added the period, some of them didn't, some of them added the comma, some of them didn't, some of them used a colon, some of them didn't. So if you want consistent data, you can force people to enter consistent data, you'll get more consistent data.
Yeah.
That's what I find.
So, okay, now I've got two functions defined as to, what to do on these particular things, but now I need some way of it knowing to call these functions. So
right.
I'm going to put in this section of code, and this basically says, okay, this is the section of code where we capitalize and remove periods. And so I list what fields this is going to actually look at. So I have all these different fields that it'll look at, and you can do separate fields by separating the IDs with commas.
Right.
So I'm doing it all in one line here, and then add the on here. And so it's looking at these fields, and on a key up, when you release a key, this is when this function is going to take place. It's going to do, it's going to call the capitalized words function, and it'll look at the value within that particular field, whichever field it is. And the same thing with the remove periods function. It's going to look at the value in there and evaluate it. Now, keep in mind that one drastic difference between this kind of validation or formatting as opposed to the validation that I've shown in the past two episodes. The other validation that we used, where we took over the submit button, that works well to clean up pre-existing data. So, it'll look at the field and it'll always catch those things. So if you put your validation in way after the patron records have been created, whenever you go back and edit those patrons, it'll catch that stuff. This is different. This is looking at things only on key up, and it's only looking at the last word. So it's not going to retroactively, catch things and fix them. It's only going to catch things as they're being entered. So that's a huge difference in this type of validation. It's good. I like this, but this one can be worked around a little bit, whereas the other one was more of a stickler and could retroactively fix, catch things that had been entered prior to the validation being added to the form. So, all right, so this will watch on key presses when I'm entering information on that form. So I'm going to save this. And now I'm going to edit this patron. And let me get rid of this last name. So the last name is Frosty. I'm going to start typing without capitalization in mind. and it automatically capitalized the word there. So it's automatically capitalizing the first letter of each word. But let's say I had something like O'Brien. Okay, this is not how I would enter it. I would normally capitalize the B, but you'll see that it's, as I let go of the key, it changed it to lowercase. So this is where, to work around it, I would add a space at the end temporarily to fix that. Oh, and well, you have to keep the space in there. So, you may have to come up with some more
Exceptions,
rules, exceptions on things like this in order to fix that. So, that is definitely an issue. Hyphenated names work fine with this. If I were to do so, it will not capitalize the I, but I can go back in this one and fix this one. It will ignore this because it starts with Mac. So if I do Macintosh, it does not fix it because that was one of the exceptions. So that's one I can
right.
do correctly on the fly, but it's also one that can get messed up easily. It can break a rule easily. So that's the trade-off with some of those exceptions. And it will work on different fields. I have assigned this to the surname, the first name, addresses and cities. So like, for example, put this back to Frosty. If I go down here, PO box should enter correctly. So if I do PO, see now there's an issue there. That's something else that I could probably fix with an exception. If it sees PO box, it could I could potentially
force the capitalization. Yeah.
Right. So, but when I do PO, if I actually type it correctly, it will leave it. It will not fix that. So we do have that. Plus, we have the rule or the function in there that removes periods. So if I were to try to enter this as P.O. box, you notice it took out the periods.
Right.
Or if if I'm doing something like right street period, it's not gonna take it. So it's just another way that you can do some on the fly fixing of data entry to match what you expect to be entered. And my rules don't cover everything. The complete rules that we have don't cover absolutely everything. There have been one-offs, and I have addressed that in different ways. And one of those ways was, I would always, like, for example, if I had a second word here, as I said, it only looks at the last word. So if I go in here and change the word before it, I can mess it up. So that was a workaround that was added. I changed it so it only looks at the last word that was entered. So if you had to work around, it gives you some flexibility in some ways. Doesn't work with the O'Brien because you have to have a space in there separating it from another word. So that's where I would actually need to go in and massage the exceptions and fix it so that it would accept O'Brien in the format that it needs to be in.
Right.
But so not depending how you want to fix your Patron data. I do like the previous method of validation where it's fixing it on the or it's checking things as you submit and having you go back and correct it, because it is helping not only to keep the data consistent, but it's also training the staff to enter things correctly. the
Yeah.
first time. This one, brute force is not retroactive on past information that's entered. It's only going to, look at stuff that you're actively entering.
Right.
So, but it does help you correct things along the way. Just to give you an idea of more of what you can do with it, this is all of that brute force code that I use. And there are some things that I do in here. So we do the capitalize and remove periods. I have fixed street abbreviations. So on street abbreviations, I'll replace like AV with AVE. I will replace avenue with AVE. I will replace street with or STR with ST, and replace street with ST, place with PL, things of that nature. There are a few others in here. Sometimes you can get into trouble with some of these things, like because these words are actually part of another
word. I've had that with like Broad Street is one word in one of our cities, and if I were to implement that kind of a thing, then people would say I can't. It always changes to Broadst.
Yeah.
Which is not correct.
Correct.
So I've tried to avoid doing that. So,
but
I can show you quickly one of the things that I have implemented.
Before you do that, just to add though, this was one of the reasons why I had it look at just the last portion, the last word.
Yeah.
Because then you can go back and you can go fix that lane or that that street or whatever, or the circle, so that it's spelled out and it won't keep forcing it back. Because you're obviously ending it with an abbreviation of some sort. So and before you go in, other things that we look at, there are some places where we'll change things to just uppercase, like if we're doing abbreviations for states.
That's the one I was going to show. I've got a different way of doing that, so I can talk about that briefly. But
there are some places where we're looking for digits only, like in phone numbers. There are also ways that we look at formatting the phone number to make sure that the phone number is formatted correctly, so it's putting it in the specific way that we want. So you can't enter parentheses around the area code with this. The brute force will actually remove the parentheses and force you to enter it in the correct format, which is really nice.
Yeah.
So those are the ways that we've used the brute force type of formatting validation on our system. And I will go ahead and let you share what you've been doing.
Yeah, the one thing that I was going to mention is, let me share this. We have one library. I have one library I have several libraries that their card numbers include letters. It's not just digits, they have letters. And at one of these libraries, there was a batch of data that got imported where the card numbers that were imported, this patron has letters in her card number. The letters that got imported were lowercase letters instead of uppercase letters. The problem there, well, they also have item barcodes that include letters, and some of those were imported from long ago. Some of the imports included lowercase letters in the data. And barcode 3 of 9, which is the standard barcode that most of our libraries use, and it's one of the default barcodes in Koha, can't reproduce lowercase letters. And so what I've got is a bit of code. Let me cancel this and go back over here and just plug this in. I've gone about it in a slightly different way. So I've got the selector for state, and that needs a comma in it, and the selector for card number on key up it takes this value and it returns it as an uppercase. So it's just a different version of different way of doing that same function. But if I save that, then if I go back to this borrower, and if I try to enter the state as lowercase, it comes back as uppercase.
Mhm.
And the same is true with the, you just can't enter those characters as lowercase letters. And it's just a slightly different way of going about it.
Right.
Than what you were doing, but it's doing the exact same thing. And so that's one of the things that I have built into our system, because it is absolutely necessary for this one library in particular, where all of their it was some kind of batch importing problem that gave them all of these. I think we're down to just a few hundred patrons that have lowercase letters in their card numbers, but you cannot reproduce those cards in the barcode 389 font. And the same is true of the item records. You can't reproduce those. So it's critical for that library to make sure that those get reproduced as uppercase characters.
Right. I'll point out too, because I saw that in your example, you defined what to do right there.
Yeah.
In that particular I don't know how
right.
to define that. Right where you recognize that, right in the key up, you define what to do there. And
yeah,
you can totally do that. The reason I decided to do my functions completely separate and call them is so that if I wanted to, I can reuse them in other places.
Yeah, that's true. That's totally true.
So like, my removal of the period, I can call that one up in combination with another function at the same time. So I don't have to keep, building that same functionality each time I identify what needs to be changed. So yeah, defining your functions beforehand is helpful, especially if you're going to reuse those over and over. But if you're only using it once, there's no reason why you can't define it right there in the key up.
Yep, it's just a different way of doing the same thing.
Yep. All right, well, that is it for our validation videos for now. And if you want to learn more about validation, you can find the information in the jQuery library that will be pointing to references for this code and our previous two videos. You'll find links to those in our videos. So feel free to check that out. But if you have questions about something, or if you'd like to see more, or if you're trying to figure something out and you're not sure how to do it, go to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/koha-US, no hyphen, and you'll be able to find our videos in there, and you can comment on them. If you like our videos, if you've liked the things that we've pulled off and done, make sure that you like it. You can like the playlist too, but you can also subscribe so that you're up to date anytime a video is released. And we love to hear back from people and see what they think. So please feel free to comment. And that is it for today.
Yep, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. I think next time we're going to talk about the Patron batch permissions plugin, which I just discovered at the Koha conference. And it will be a revolution for the way we're doing passwords and managing staff logins here at Neckles. So I wanted to talk about that because it's exciting and fun. So
awesome. All right, we'll see everybody again in a couple weeks.
Bye.